Welcome everyone to our Climate and Transparency webinar with Sierra Club, Act on Mass, and 350 Mass. We're going to get rolling in just a moment, another minute or two, but thank you all so much for being here. Just going to go to the next slide, which has the instructions there. Introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, where you're calling from, and your organization. I'm Dan, I use he, him. I'm not calling from JP, but I live in JP, and I'm with 350 Mass. And I guess I should follow my own instructions better and put that in the chat. Good to see some great JP folks in there, some Western Mass folks there. That's beautiful. Welcome, everyone. Awesome. Welcome, Barbara. Good to have you here. Cool. Vic, Olivia, you ready to get rolling? Cool. So welcome, everyone. Please feel free to keep introducing yourself in the chat. We're going to get started with our webinar. And I think I'm going to pass it off to Olivier first to do a little run through of our agenda and a little welcome activity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dan. And I'll let you know when to move to the next slide. It's good to see you all here. Glad you were able to make it out tonight. So just wanted to kind of give everyone a quick look into what we're going to be going over tonight. We're going to be starting it off with this kickoff. So we've already started doing some welcome and intros, continue to keep putting those through. We're going to do an intro poll just to kind of get a sense check on what people's experiences are thus far with transparency and working with the legislature in the civic process. And then a quick little intro on who we are. Then we're going to be going through Legislative 101, so how bills become law and why transparency matters. We're going to go into some energy affordability and how we got to where we are, and give some sort of context on what's been going on recently. And then we're going to be providing everyone with some key takeaways on what you can do to work towards a more transparent state house, both in service of climate goals and anything else. If you're doing democracy work, housing, etc. So, Dan, if you could go to the next slide, we can do our intro poll. Next one, there you go. Cool. So we're having some technical difficulties with the poll, so we're going to have a show of hands. Or if you don't have your camera on and you're not able to turn it on from where you are, we're going to do react with like a heart or something, or put something in the chat. So first, raise your hand or react in some way if you have signed a petition for some sort of legislation. Okay, it's a good number of people. Looks like maybe 80, 90% of people. It's good turnout. Okay, so most people. Okay, how many of you have emailed your reps? Okay, wow, okay, this is a very civically engaged group. That's great. What about calling your rep? Have any of you actually gotten through to your representative or one of their staffers? Wow, okay, I've never seen a Zoom, so cool. Okay, well, how many of you have attended an in-person lobby day? That's like another level of engagement there. Lovely. Well, if you haven't, it's a great experience. Highly recommend. Okay, this one is like brownie points. How many of you have checked your rep's Office of Campaign and Political Finance disclosures to see campaign funding sources? Ah, yeah, the hands are coming down. To see funding sources and amounts. Okay, still a good number of you. Good to see. Well, if you haven't done that, it's another great lever in the toolkit. So we'll get to that later. Cool. Well, that concludes our opening activity. We just wanted to kind of see where the crowd was at. But passing it off to you, Dan, I believe.
Thank you so much, Olivier. I want to take a moment to introduce the organizations that are running this webinar tonight. Vic, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Vic Mohenka. I use he and they pronouns. I am the chapter director at Sierra Club, Massachusetts. And yeah, we're so happy to co-host. I also just wanted to say that there was a little change of plans, and Scotia from Act on Mass will not be joining us, but that's a group that I've been supporting and that Sierra Club has been really close with since its founding back, I think around 8+ years ago, trying to push for transparency at the State House. And this is also a top priority for Sierra Club, so we're so happy to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vic. And I'm Dan. I'm the legislative manager with 350 Mass. We're a network of activists all across the state in local nodes from the Cape to the Berkshires, fighting for a just and sustainable future. And then another hat that I wear is as co-facilitator of the Mass Power Forward Coalition with Claire Carl from UMass Action. And Vic, are you formally a co-facilitator? Not anymore. Have been in the past. But Mass Power Forward is the biggest grassroots climate coalition in the state. If you have seen papers, news of many activists at the State House holding up signs saying "Stop gas, big climate bill now," that's likely been us. And it includes your classic climate and progressive groups. It includes conservation groups, people really concerned about their trees in their neighborhood, and includes local groups all across the state, and many faith-based ones as well. And then Mass Power Forward works because it is in close solidarity with our frontline partners, including MACOB, the North American Indian Center of Boston, the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, ACE, Alternatives for Community and Environment, and several others around the state who represents the communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. And then I'm going to pass it back to Vic to talk about some of our transparency issues here in lovely Massachusetts.
Awesome. Yeah, so can we flip to pass the table of contents? Yeah, so why does progressive popular legislation keep dying? Massachusetts has a long storied history. People might know us, especially when I talk to other chapter directors around the country, just seeing that we're super progressive, they must think that everything that we're fighting for is Sierra Club and other progressive groups on healthcare, immigration, all these other fights, education, that all passes really easily. And what we've seen is that's just not the case. Um, we're often known for those steps that we take. And some of the story that doesn't get out is all the popular legislation that does not pass. So over and over again, what we see is popular legislation. And by popular, I'm talking about legislation that if you pull it out, the vast majority of the population in Massachusetts supports. There's also popular as in co-sponsorship. So there's 160 representatives. Some bills will have 100, 120, 130 co-sponsors, meaning that's how many representatives signed on to it. And yet those bills still aren't passing. And the other thing that we see is that even though we have a Democratic supermajority trifecta, meaning that the Democratic Party representatives, senators, and the governor are all part of the same party and go through a democratic process to go create a democratic policy platform, those issues do not pass at the Massachusetts State House. So here's some of the other issues that have been really hard to push for. Some of them we're seeing some progress on recently, like same-day voter registration, Safe Communities Act, and then you also have the Healthy Youth Act, Stop Wage Theft, Medicare for All. These are all incredibly popular policies, but for some reason they keep dying, and it's very hard to say why these aren't passing because they're not going to floor votes. So there's no way if you are somebody in Massachusetts who wants these issues, there's no way for you to know where your representatives stand on it. We can go next. And like I said, everyday people are locked out of the process. So the way it should work is that we vote people in and they ask us what policies that we want to see. And then they go and fight for it. They file bills, they file amendments, it goes to floor votes, and we can see what they do. Instead, what we see is there's a closed door process with a lack of transparency where we don't know how key decisions are being made, how bills are moving through committees, how the decision is made whether a bill goes out of committee or whether it dies in committee and goes to study. And then we also don't know why bills aren't going to the floor, why bills might get a voice vote instead of a roll call vote, which are these procedural terms that the State House uses to concentrate power at the top to disempower rank and file legislators. Those are the legislators who don't have big stipends or chairmanships or big campaign accounts, and they don't have the following or the ability to pressure one or two people at the top who can kind of make all the decisions for everyone else. And even if all of these decisions are being made democratically, like as a choice between all the legislators, the voters and the public aren't aware of how that process works. And there's no way to know how your legislator is being represented in that, back room, the smoke-filled back room where these decisions are being made. Um, I think we can just go to the third one in the series. So we've had a long movement for state house reform. I mentioned I started doing Act on Mass support when I was a climate activist since 2018. And we've had a lot of really good victories. There's the People's House campaign. There's a transparency ballot questions, where the way this worked is it's a referendum that you could do locally and tell your state representative that they should support transparency. We also had a ballot initiative, if you all remember voting in Massachusetts in 2024. Question one was for a legislative audit, which I think is one of the most reliable ways to poll the public about where they stand on an issue. And this won by some of the biggest margins we've ever seen ballot initiatives win by. Something that I always say to politicians and to advocates is that anti-corruption is popular. Massachusetts has a long history of the past 20, 30 years of politicians mired in corruption, being involved with, federal investigations, all of this. People want to see a state house that works for us, that is transparent, and that isn't corrupt. We don't want to feel like our politicians are being bought off to go do something that we didn't vote for them to do. And then most recently, we had a challenger to big state house leader, Marjorie Decker, and in Cambridge, Evan Mackay almost won. There's some headlines that that I think are from the week before the recount where that result was flipped. But we had a challenger to a state representative seat who ran almost purely on transparency and almost beat a powerful member of leadership in Cambridge just based on this message. And Massachusetts historically is the least contested state house in the country. So that is why we only have one or two races we could point to, maybe House Ways and Means chair in 2018, and then a transparency election in 2024, because it's very uncommon for people to even face primaries and for voters to have an actual choice at the ballot box about who's representing them for all of those policies in the slide before this. We can keep going. Thank you. And we are continuing the fight. So this this has been a very dramatic up and down battle within the state house with lots of different, I call them battlegrounds, these different specific rules fights that keep popping up in ways that the House and the Senate keep bickering over what they want to happen. In last June, we got a really great rules package. The way I describe it is that the advocates and activists, we got 75% of what we wanted. We might talk a little bit later about some of the loopholes and places where we want even more transparency or more accountability, that the House and Senate are following the rules that they wrote and agreed to. But we did make a ton of progress on something that leadership said they didn't want to do. And a lot of them said they wouldn't do it ever. But we saw with people power, we were able to force the issue, show them that it's popular, and make new rules happen. So this is our little schoolhouse rock, education about how a bill becomes a law. And we are pretty deep into the legislative session. We've gone through a lot of the process already. For folks who don't know, it starts in odd years. So it's the recent one, 194th, started in January of 2025. And formal sessions will technically end July 31st this year. And the actual session itself ends December 31st this year. We have a 2-year full-time legislative cycle in Massachusetts. that's somewhat uncommon. A lot of my colleagues around the country will have like a 30-day, or a 4-month legislative session, or there'll be a year long. There's a lot of variety there in different states. Um, and one thing that we always want to talk about is our power analysis. So, who's in charge? Who do we influence? How do we get something over the finish line inside of the state house? So, the thing to know here is the numbers. We have 160 representatives and 40 senators. We have the bicameral legislature, which means that there's a House and a Senate. They both can file legislation. Thanks to the new rules, they can both push legislation out of their committees onto the floor of their respective chambers. Um, and going by the math, we have 160 representatives, but some of them are Democrats. Democrats control the House. And to control that House Democratic voting bloc to get a majority, our math is around 65 to 68 representatives have to solidly be reliable votes for something that is like public or privately for an issue to go through. So that is kind of our, you could think of it as our win number. If we can get 68 representatives to say, hey, I'm going to stand up and actually vote against what leadership wants, that is what we need to win on these issues. And that is something that's very difficult, something that historically we have not been able to achieve. We don't have the same breakdown set up for the Senate because this is pulled from a climate presentation. And usually on the issues of climate, the state Senate has been a lot closer to what advocates are asking for, and the House is much closer to what industry is asking for. So a lot of our efforts have been focused on trying to get the House to take up more of the sections that are in the Senate bills and then drop some of the sections that industry tries to push to increase pollution and increase residential utility bills because that makes it cheaper for companies. I think we can move on. Yeah.
Thank you
There's
so
so much
much,
to
Vic.
explain there. Yeah. So,
And if you
uh,
were mystified by legislative complexity, don't worry, there will be a hefty Q&A section at the end for you to ask all of your questions to Vic. Please also feel free to put questions in the chat. If it feels like it's developing into a longer discussion, we ask that you hold off until the end. But for short questions, for substantive questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. Next up, we have our debrief of what happened with the Climate Rollback Bill, talking about energy affordability and how that feeds into our climate fight that is happening right now. So last November was a very exciting time. We had a bill come almost out of nowhere that tried to roll back 5 years of climate progress. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of that, how that happened, a little bit of the blow by blow. I'm going to weave in the story of another bill, the Make Polluters Pay bill, where you see an action around that in this picture, and talk about how our fight for transparency directly influenced these climate fights. So in Massachusetts, we've been very successful as a climate movement overall. While there are definitely structural obstacles that Vic outlined in their presentation, we've consistently passed bills many sessions in a row that have moved the needle bit by bit towards a just and sustainable future. Last year, the House chair of the Powerful Energy Committee was removed from his position after a lengthy battle over the energy bill. He was removed not because he was supporting industry or because he was particularly bad on climate, but because he was in a relationship with an energy industry lobbyist. And when state house leadership moves people around, they rarely drop them when it's their people. They move them up. So he's now, I think, a division chair and has a lot of backroom sway over this climate bill. The new chair didn't have the subtlety of the old chair, and he launched in November an all-out assault on climate progress that we've been calling the Climate Rollback Bill. You might also heard of it as the Energy Affordability Bill, but it essentially is a wish list of everything industry wants to continue making money off of expensive gas infrastructure and cut programs like Mass Save that are saving people money with clean heat. And that's one narrative that we've really been pushing as a movement, that the way to save people money is to build out solar, to offer battery storage, offer really good insulation and good loans, and help them save money with clean heat. And so in November, the chair introduced this bill and tried to really quickly ram this through. He took what was essentially a 4-page solar bill and expanded it. He has a lot of authority under the rules to redraft bills. And so he expanded a 4-page solar bill into a 100 and something page omnibus bill, which means that it has a lot of different things packed into it, and said in 2 days, we're going to have a committee vote on this bill, which is pretty unprecedented. It's extremely rare that he would take a bill that was only about one slice of the issue and decide, I'm just going to turn that into what I want. We activated. Our movement showed up at the building. We made it extremely uncomfortable. There's a great picture here of Vic speaking to a member of the committee. And we made that really clear to them that this was unacceptable, that the process was bad and the substance was bad too. If you are in one of these pictures also, as an aside, please put it in the chat. I know we had a lot of people who were there that day who are on this call tonight. But because of our pressure and because of the bad process, 4 members of the committee reserved their right, which is sort of an abstention. This is really important because normally the State House keeps everyone marching in lockstep. If you defy leadership, you might lose your stipend, which we'll get to more later. You might lose your committee assignments. You won't be able to bring anything back to your community. And so they keep legislators on a really short leash. For 4 members of this committee, and there's only 11 on the House side of the committee, to buck leadership is pretty exciting and really only happened both because we put this pressure on them as a movement and because we had these recorded committee votes, we could see how they were voting. I also want to note that 2 of these reserve right votes were the Republican members of the committee who voted no because the process was so bad and so opaque. And I do want to highlight that the transparency issue is one where we've been able to form some unlikely alliances with Republicans in the State House who are, as you might expect, are very out of power in Massachusetts and are interested in more opaque, transparent government. Another unusual thing about the timing of all of this was that the day after the committee vote, there had already been a hearing scheduled on one of our bills, which the Sierra Club has put a lot of leadership into, so have our friends from the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, to stop large gas system expansion. This is the real moneymaker for the gas industry, these big pipelines that they can charge us for decades and decades. And we brought 150 people to the State House to pack the room and show that this is just unacceptable. You can't roll back 5 years of climate progress. You can't make our communities sicker and poorer and in a worse climate. And the next Monday in the news, the Ways and Means chair said he was going to pause progress on this bill. They were going to take out one of the worst provisions, which was gutting the climate goals, and that we need to listen to our constituents. It was an extremely rare admission from State House leadership that public energy, public activism actually changed what they were planning on doing. This was a win. At the same time, though, we suffered a loss. So this campaign, we've been leading with 350 Mass, with Sierra Club, with Mass Power Forward, to make the biggest polluters pay for climate damages. And the night that we were celebrating a really strong showing that split off some from this committee vote, in the different committee, in the Environment Committee, the Senate chair tried to send the bill to study that very night while our entire movement was focused on stopping this climate rollback bill. She also did this the night before we met to address the chair's concerns. And because legislators knew that we were going to see how they voted, that the committee votes would be recorded, 3 of them peeled off. The majority did not vote with the chair. Unfortunately, an abstention is not enough to stop the study order. We needed one more to co-sponsor. Sorry, not to co-sponsor, to vote to save the bill. But it is extremely rare for legislators to not vote with their chairs. And this showed us just how close our movement had gotten to stopping this study order in its tracks. And as Vic mentioned earlier, a study order is the polite way that they kill things in the dark. The House chair saw this and did something even sneakier. She extended the deadline on the bill and used a new House rule that if the deadline is extended and then we get to the deadline and there's no vote, it's automatically sent to study. So we're still pushing for her to hold a vote. There's still nothing online in any of the public record about the House study order, about the extension, about any of it. And so we're continuing to push for transparency. And this goes into what Vic was talking about earlier, that we've won some major victories. It's really helpful to know where legislators stand because then we can hold them accountable. But they still have these loopholes they can use to avoid being held accountable by their constituents and avoid telling their constituents how they're representing them. They work for us and they really need to be transparent about how they're using that power. So that gets into a bit of the drama in November. I know there's some folks on this call who were integrally involved in quite a bit of that, and this is very much the high-level version. But we want to talk a little bit about the big takeaways from this. So legislators really only respond to money, power, and public outcry. We saw that until they had eyes on them, they were willing to do whatever they wanted, or really whatever the industry wanted. When we put them on blast, they do listen. When we have different movements coming together, when we turn out our people power, that helps. And transparency efforts make a big difference. And there's interplay between these movements. So these transparency efforts helped us on climate, and our climate pressure helped force the legislators to be more transparent and actually use these new rules that the transparency movement had fought for and won. Next, we have some actions for y'all to take tonight before we get into our Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment to see all your faces, and so I can, slightly seamlessly put this in the chat. But we have two actions to take all together. The first is the stipend reform campaign. This campaign is a ballot question, which is a nonpartisan question on your ballot in November. And it's going to need some help to get enough signatures to get on the ballot. So if you're able to sign up at that link and show up and help collect signatures, that would be hugely, hugely helpful. And then next up, we have an action network, which is an easy letter writing tool to urge your legislator to bring our priorities, our mass power forward priorities, to Ways and Means and urge them to have the best possible climate bill. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Sierra Club, Act on Mass, and all of our partners involved. I'm going to stop recording there and get into our Q&A.